I am building the Vermont Farmhouse Junior, and today I'm going to show you the advantage of painting all the walls and pieces before you build. And it all begins with choosing the right paint for the job. Hello, my crafty dolls, and welcome to my craft room. I am Grandma Kitty, and I am so glad you're here. Now, this is episode 5 of my Vermont Farmhouse Junior dollhouse build from start to finish. And I'm really excited today because I'm finally going to be starting to work on the dollhouse, because so far I've been really in the planning stage, because building a dollhouse is not a weekend project. It really does take a long time. So now if you want to follow along with me, you got to go out and check my previous episodes where I show you how to plan and get all your supplies. And I have a playlist set up right on the YouTube page. So go ahead and check that out. And I'm actually building my house in real time. So my upcoming videos are going to be spaced apart about a week. I have to build everything, record, edit, and then upload my video. So it does take me a little bit of time. I'm a one-person show over here. So make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss out on the next episode, which is wallpapering the walls before we build the dollhouse. I am breaking the rules, so you don't want to miss out. But today we are going to talk all about paint, and I'm going to give you a little lesson on the different types of paint. And we're going to talk about which paint is going to give us the best results for our dollhouse. And then I'm going to show you exactly what to paint when it comes to all the little different dollhouse kit pieces. So that is why it's so important to label all of your pieces. So if you need help with any of that, you got to go back and watch my video on unboxing and planning, and I show you how to do all that. But first, we need a little paint lesson, and I promise I'm not going to test you on any of this. But first, we have acrylic paint, and that, of course, is all of those basic craft paints, and they're very, very good paints. They're very durable. They're great for outside projects. The only bad part is the consistency is really thick, and it's not suitable for painting really large areas like our dollhouse walls, which are really big. Craft paint also has limited colors, and most craft paint comes in matte finish. And I really think your paint should have a little bit of a sheen to it. Just makes it look more professional and nicer. Now, I know you can get craft paint in satin or gloss, but then your color options go down. And then we have latex paint, and that is your typical house paint you paint your living room walls with. We've all used it before. And you can go to acehardware.com and order these little paint samples. They're about 8 ounces. Get them in satin for only about $6 to $8. Now, this is Benjamin Moore. My label is covering the Benjamin Moore, but this is what it looks like. And the best part about these paint samples is you can still get your color mixed. So you have a choice of over 3,500 colors. So good luck picking a color. Now, the advantage of latex paint is that it's a lot thinner than your acrylic paints. So it's great for the large surface areas of our dollhouse walls. So that paint is going to glide on silky smooth, and it's going to dry faster. And really the only disadvantage to latex paint, it's not good for direct light or wet weather, which I found funny because who's going to be putting their dollhouse outside? Not me. All right, next up we have enamel house paint. And this paint typically has primer in it. And you can get this Clark and Kensington paint in satin at acehardware.com. You can mix your color for only $5.99 for 8 ounces. Now, enamel paint is better than latex because of the primer, and the enamel is more durable. So when you're thinking of your home, latex paint would be for your walls and ceilings, and your enamel paint would be for painting your cabinets, your doors, and your trim. So those surfaces that tend to chip more. Now, choosing between the three, acrylic paint is definitely out. And I'm not saying it's garbage. It's very, very good paint, but it's just not right for our project. But if you have your heart set on craft paint, make sure you get one with a satin finish. Okay, so between the latex and the enamel, both are great. So whichever one you want to choose. I'm going to choose the Enamel in Satin by Clark and Kensington, mainly because of the primer and its durability. Now, I'm going to be using this paint for the exterior, the ceilings, and the trim. That's going to cover me. Now, speaking of primer, you do not need a separate primer. That is just extra painting and more work. And trust me, we have so much painting to do. We don't need any more. And honestly, if you use this paint, 2 coats will get the job done. All right, and now we have to pick our paint colors, and that is definitely the hardest part. And I chose my colors with my granddaughter in mind, pink and pink. And do you remember that old movie with Sally Field and Julia Roberts, Steel Magnolias? And they asked Shelby in the movie what her wedding colors were, and she said, "My colors are blush and bashful." Such a great movie. So every time I think of pink and pink, I think of that movie. So my exterior walls are going to be dark pink, and then I'm going to use the lighter pink for my trim, and then I'm going to bring in this Robin's Egg Blue, one of my favorite colors, for my accent. I'm also going to tie in a little bit of yellow, and I'm thinking of doing some folk art and really go all out with the whimsy and cutesy girly look. But I'm going to do that on a later episode. We have a lot of painting to do. So now I did buy one paint sample for each color. So you only need one. And the yellow, I'm going to use craft paint for my little bit of folk art painting because it's only a little bit. See, I like craft paint. I'm not digging it. All right, now you're at the hardware store. You have to get a few supplies. And the first thing is you really need to use a good brush. Do not skimp. Get a good one. I've used cheap brushes before and completely regretted it. And this brush is going to be really good for our outside walls with the siding. So that means ditch the sponge brush. Not a good project for the sponge brush, so get rid of that one. You do need a couple of smaller artist brushes. I like the little flat one, and get yourself a little round one because those are going to come in handy. You're going to need a small foam roller, and this is going to be good for your ceilings. And unfortunately, we're going to have to do some sanding, so get yourself a sanding block. This is a good one. It has some sharp edges, better than the sandpaper. And don't forget to keep your instructions handy because we're going to be referring to some diagrams so we know what to paint. But I am going to show you what to paint and what not to paint. So it's kind of confusing, but I'm going to help you out. And there's a huge advantage to painting all our pieces ahead of time before we build. It is so much easier. We're going to get clean brush strokes. It's going to look so professional. It's going to be great. And in my opinion, I think it would be so much harder, 3 times harder, to paint a house that was fully complete. You'd almost be like, Michelangelo on his back, trying to paint those really hard parts. So now, before we start painting, I want to make sure you sand some of your pieces. And everything is going to get 2 coats. And remember, very important, where pieces are going to be glued together, you want to keep those unpainted. And sometimes it's unavoidable, but I am going to help you. So let's go. We have a ton of painting to do. Now, before we even start, we need to set up the most important tool, the TVs, because trust me, my crafty dolls, there are many hours of painting ahead of us, and we need to watch some good movies. And my first movie is Steel Magnolias, my inspiration for my blush and bashful color palette. That was my best impression of a Southern accent. All right, I got my movie on, and now I'm just going to set up my workspace. I'm going to throw a plastic cover on my table, and then a piece of cardboard really comes in handy because I always make a big mess when I'm painting. Now, the first thing we're going to start painting are the outside walls. So I have both side walls, and then I have the front. And here are my colors, blush and bashful.
Your colors, Shelby. They're blush and bashful. Our colors are pink and pink. My colors are blush and bashful, Mama.
Oh, that is such a great movie. But my colors really are Falling in Love and Pink Rose Petals. And the darker color is going to be for my outside wall, and the lighter color is going to be for my trim and for my ceilings. I've got my little paint sample here in my dark pink. And to keep our paint jar from getting too messy, I'm going to put a strip of tape across the top so I can wipe the excess so I don't make a big mess. I haven't even started and I'm covered with paint, so make sure you have a couple of damp cloths so you can do some quick cleanups. Now, when painting your outside walls, you want to make sure you do not paint the edges of your walls or the bottom or even the top where the roof goes. You just want to paint the front with the clapboard. All right, here we go. It's always exciting when you put your new brush into your paint and start painting until the painting coma starts and you wish it was over. Now, to make your painting go as smooth as it can be, you really need to use a quality paintbrush. Do not use those sponge brushes. My Crafty Dolls, you are going to regret it. You're going to be picking out pieces of sponge because of those rough walls. And most importantly, take your time and paint thin layers. You do not want globs of paint. You are not going to get away with just one coat. Now, if you're using this quality paint, 2 coats will do the job. Painting around the doors and the windows, the paint likes to collect and drip. So make sure you have your rags and wipe around the inside of those doorways and windows because we do not want globs of paint that we're going to have to sand later. Now, watching me paint probably is worse than watching paint dry, but with a little bit of movie magic, I turned hours into just seconds. If only that were true. My first coat is all finished, and now I'm going to wrap up my brush in plastic for later. And while my walls dry, I'm going to catch the end of my movie. And my Crafty Dolls, I forgot just how sad this movie is, but at least I have my kitty to cry on. Now moving on to the gable, and it really helps to tape it together to see exactly what you need to paint. Now I'm going to paint the face of the gable with my dark pink. Now you do have the option of shingling the gable, but I'm going to skip that part. Now I'm going to paint the eave of the gable, my very light pink trim color. Now when you lay the gable roof flat, you're just going to paint the bottom. Now just make sure you don't paint the outside trim. That is where our gingerbread trim is going to be glued. Now the inside, I am going to wallpaper the walls, but if you decide to paint these walls, you want to go ahead and paint them now. Now the outside walls are completely dry, and now the instructions suggest to sand the walls after the first coat. Now my Crafty Dolls, this is a very time-consuming step to make those clapboards silky smooth. And honestly, I don't think it's worth it. So I am breaking the law and I'm skipping that step. Now I am, however, going to sand some of the edges and make sure there's no globs of paint. And I am going to sand all the pet hair that is in the paint. I can't imagine why. Now it's time for a new movie, Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility. The look of love at first sight. Aw, to be in love in a movie. Okay, back to work. Our walls need a second coat of paint. And the walls are all finished and they're looking really good. Now, that is a lot of pink, but I love it. Time for another movie, and this one is one of my top 5 movies of all time. Clue. It is so funny.
Wasn't here. No. 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 Maybe one of us was murdering the cook. Who wasn't here with us? Do you know? I do.
Now we're going to move on to painting the ceilings. I have the 3 floors here. The first floor, which is the thinnest floor, I'm going to simply set aside for now. And the second and third floors, I'm going to flip them over and I'm going to paint the ceilings. Now, it's really important to always keep those instructions handy because the third floor ceiling and roof is much more complicated to figure out what to paint. We have to build some of the house first, do some measuring, and then paint. So we are going to completely ignore this piece for now and stash it away. I'm going to be using my light pink trim color for my ceilings, and it's a perfect complement for all my wallpapers. And make sure you use a foam roller for this step, and make sure you paint thin layers. And you're probably going to need 2 coats and maybe even 3. Now I'm going to paint the edge of the floors that you're going to see from the back of the house. I'm going to start with the second floor, and you want the staircase hole to be on the upper left-hand side, and we're going to paint the front edge. And using a roller for this step makes it super easy. Wipe up any excess paint you got on the floor before it dries. Now we're going to do the same thing for the third floor. You just want to make sure that electrical slot is on the bottom right hand side and paint the front. And now for the first floor, if you look at the illustration, you can see that you're going to see that edge. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to paint just one edge of the floor, and it really doesn't matter which edge. They're both the same. And just make sure you go back and do a second coat on all of those edges. And now I'm going to paint the edges of the staircase opening, and I'm going to paint it the same color as my ceilings, the nice light pink. Now this tiny little piece is the groove filler to fill the gap in the wall along the stairs, and I'm just going to paint it the same color. And now I'm going to move on to the room dividers, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to paint the edge that you can see from the back. I'm going to quick look at my diagram and make sure I paint the correct edge. On the 2 room dividers for floors 1 and 2, I want to paint the edge closest to the door opening. And for the attic triangle dividers, you want to find the straight right angle and paint that edge, and just don't forget to go back and give everything a second coat. Now I'm going to go back to my 2 outside walls, the left side and the right side, and I'm going to set them up so I can see exactly which edge is going to be facing the back and exposed, and I'm going to give those a quick paint as well. Now I'm moving on to the rear roof. This is the part that goes over the attic, and I'm going to lay all the pieces out and figure out what parts of the pieces we need to paint. You can see that the 2 eave pieces hang over the edge of the roof, so I'm going to paint the backs of these 2 pieces, and I'm also going to paint the 3 side edges that we're going to be able to see. Now don't paint the top of these pieces because those are going to be glued. Now moving on to the long roof piece, you want to flip it over with the beveled side up, and you just want to paint the ends, and these are going to be exposed as the eave, and there's no need to paint the whole piece because you're just not going to see it. And now we want to paint the edge of the roof, not the beveled edge, just the straight edge. And now our 2 eave pieces need to be glued on the end. So I just made a simple pencil mark line to avoid putting paint on those ends of the edge. And give it a little bit of sanding if you have a little bit of extra paint. And now it's time for another movie, Dirty Dancing. And no craft project of mine can be made without watching this great movie. I've seen it hundreds of times. It never gets old. And hands down, the greatest movie ending of all time. There is absolutely no debate. But I do wonder if Johnny and Baby lived happily ever after. I don't know. All right, back to work, painting my life away. But I am having the time of my life. Now these are the pieces for the foundation, and if you want to paint them, go right ahead. I'm going to be putting a faux brick made out of paper on this, so I'm going to set this aside for now. Now moving on to the porch floor and the roof. Now I'm going to be putting a faux decking floor made out of paper on my porch, but if you want to paint it, you want to go ahead and do that now. Now first I'm going to take the porch roof, and looking at the diagram, I am just going to paint the 3 sides that you are going to be able to see. We're going to paint the 2 sides and then the front. And we're going to do the same thing to the porch floor. We're going to paint the two sides and then the front. Now I'm going to be painting the triangle porch roof supports. And just a reminder, I'm still using my light pink trim color for all of these pieces. Now I'm only going to be painting three sides. So the two sides and then the flat side, and then I'm going to leave the bottom and the angled side unpainted. Now these pieces are the triangle spacers for the porch roof. They go in between those triangle pieces that we just painted. Now, of course, I'm just going to paint the two sides that you're going to be able to see. So one edge and then the top. Now again, I'm still using my light pink trim color for the whole porch. And moving right along, we are going to be painting the four porch posts. And you just want to paint all four sides and do not paint the top or the bottom. Now don't forget, you need 2 coats on everything. Oh my gosh, my crafty dolls, there is so much painting, but it's going to be worth it. And now we're going to paint the 2 pieces of porch trim. And again, we're going to paint and we're going to paint and we're going to paint some more. And just when you start getting tired of painting, you have to paint the porch rails. And my crafty dolls, this is so tedious. I really wish I had an airbrush. So I have to do it the old-fashioned way. But I really can't imagine trying to paint these rails while everything is glued together on a finished house. This is much easier. And there is some good news. Don't paint the edges of the rails. And the bad news is I have to go back and do a second coat. Oh my gosh. And it's time for another movie. And this one, my little Nikki Kitty picked out, You've Got Mail. And it's definitely one of my favorite romantic comedies. And it has one of the best endings to a movie. Not the greatest, but definitely one of the best. Oh, don't you just love a great movie? And a dog always makes the best happy ending. Okay, back to work. But now I'm going to be using my third color, my blue, for my gingerbread pieces. Now you want to lay out your gingerbread pieces for the roof. There's 2 sets. And then for the gable window, we're only going to be painting one side. Now my best tip for painting the gingerbread is when you're painting the face of it, a lot of the paint likes to drip and pool into the little grooves. So just take a clean dry brush and wipe that excess paint so you get a really nice clean finish. And now, to make a long story short, everything is painted. Now these are the 2 sets of trim for the roof, and you only need to paint one side. And just make sure you paint the edge because you are going to see that, as well as the ends. And I did the same thing for the gingerbread trim for the gable. I only painted one side, and just make sure you paint the edge and the bottom edge. The trim for the top of the house is just a little different. You paint both sides, you leave the bottom edge unpainted, but you paint both of the ends. The trim for the front and the sides of the porch, I painted both sides. Not sure if you're going to be able to see the back, but just to be on the safe side, I painted both sides. And don't forget to paint the edge, and of course, you got to paint the ends. And I just did the same thing for the 2 small pieces. And finally, the trim for the corners of the house. You just want to paint one side and leave the back unpainted, and then make sure those 2 sides are very well painted because you're going to see those. And for the 3 flower boxes, I painted the top, the front, and the bottom, and then both sides, and I left the back of the box unpainted. The shutters I'm going to set aside for right now and paint later because I have to glue them together. And I'm also going to set aside the window trim as well. I do need to glue them together, so I am going to paint them after I put them together. I could really use a break, but I still have to paint the outside doors. And the screen door is giving me some more tedious work, but it's going to look really good in the end, and I definitely have enough practice with tedious painting. And just like that, my doors are all painted. I painted the front door blue, and then the trim is the light pink. And for the screen door, back door, I painted the trim the light pink. And in the center there, I painted the dark pink for some contrast. And of course, the scroll work, I painted blue. Now for the back side that's going to go on the interior, I'm going to be staining my doors, and I'm also going to do the same thing for the front door that's going to be facing the inside of the room. All right, let's see how my door looks with the wall, and oh, it looks so good, and it's a little bit of a celebration. I am done painting. Oh, it's only been a few days. Now I'm going to wrap all my pieces up in tissue to store them. And I just have to protect days of work. I don't want my paint to scratch. And especially if it's humid, those paint pieces might stick together and peel. And you can do the same thing with those large walls and floors, put towels in between them. And now everything is all packed and ready for building. All right, my crafty dolls, I am finished. Oh my gosh, that took a little bit. It took me about 4 days to paint, just straight painting. And honestly, I watched more than 4 movies. It was more like 7 or 8. And honestly, I don't even remember because I was really deep in that painting coma. I didn't know where I was half the time. But I'm so glad all those pieces are painted. They look clean and polished, all set up for the building process, so that big job is done. Now, the next episode, I am going to show you how to wallpaper the walls before we build. Again, breaking the rules. So make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss out. And I am going to be using wallpaper I downloaded from Etsy. So if you want to visit some of my favorite shops for wallpaper and floors, I have all those shops listed in my description box below. And while you're out shopping on Etsy, take a swing over to my shop for digital miniature downloads for your dollhouse. I have so many designs to choose from. You print them out at home and put them together. I have so much fun designing these little miniatures and then sharing them with you. And I want to share with you my latest collection. These are 1980s toy boxes, and these are all toys that I had when I was a kid. I've got Barbie, Peaches and Cream. I had her as a kid. I have My Little Pony. I have games. I have Atari, Nintendo, Light Bright, and of course, I have Cabbage Patch Kid. And I still have my original Cabbage Patch Kid, Jody. She's in her original clothes. She lost her pants, but well, make her sit down so we don't expose little Jody here. But I still have her, and my granddaughter loves to play with her. And my new dollhouse is going to have a little antique shop in the front. So all these things are going to fit in really, really well with that. So I guess that makes me an antique. Horrible thought. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Good luck on your painting, and I will see you next time. Bye.